I've been making SCA armor for a lot of years, always for my own self, but occasionally helping out other people with their armor. This is a project that I've actually been wanting to do for a long time, which is the simplest SCA legal helm that I know how to make. And it comes from a pattern from an old book called Best of the Hammer, from pre-internet days when people would share patterns, written out by hand on paper. Initially, you see me just marking out the lines on 14 gauge sheet steel, and that's a quarter sheet, I believe, of the steel, and it's enough to make 3 helms. And there you can see the pattern. I can give dimensions at the end perhaps. Now I'm just drilling a pilot hole, after which I'm going to be drilling a larger hole, and this is to lead into the eye slot. We're drilling corners of the eye slot because I'm going to cut that while we still have it as a big sheet, just using a jigsaw. In this project, I'm deliberately using tools that you probably would be able to come across without too much effort or expense. I do have some more sophisticated tools that make it a lot faster, but I chose not to use them on this project because I guess I'm kind of trying to make a point about when you're a beginner making armor that it doesn't have to cost a mint and it doesn't have to be terribly difficult to do. So just cutting out that eye slot, and there we have, I can see. Next, I'm going to cut the main body of the helm loose from the big sheet of steel, and that's a fair amount of cutting with the jigsaw. Always use metal cutting blades. They don't actually cost noticeably more than wood cutting blades, and they're well worth it. And a jigsaw is a fairly cheap way to cut. Sure, it'd be great to have a Beverly shear. We can't all afford a Beverly shear. And if you're only making a few pieces of armor in your garage on a weekend just to get on the field, jigsaw's the way to go. You can use it for woodworking too, which is a lot of fun. Just having a tool you can reach for and say, hey, I can cut that. All right, so once we got it all cut out, then it's time to do some cleanup work. Now, ordinarily I'd go to my belt sander, but remember I said that I'm making a point here with this video. So what I'm using here is just hand files, just taking, filing out the inside of the eye slot, then filing the edges, filing the whole thing until I'm not going to tear myself up on any rough cutting burrs, and until we have a fairly nice finished project. Not all of the lines are perfectly straight, but all of them are well within SCA spec. That eye slot is just under 7/8 of an inch. Then I'm going to center punch the holes for the breathes and for the rivets. And it's important to center punch because that drill bit will skate and wander just at the moment when you really didn't want it to. But if you've got it center punched, it's a whole lot easier to keep it in place as you're drilling it out. And yes, this gets tedious without a drill press. Again, back to making the point. My drill press didn't get used in this project. My hand drill did a lot. All right, then I start the bend for the curvature of the piece on a piece of pipe. Now you can use a log. You don't even have to do this part. I just find that it speeds up what happens next, which is to get the bend a lot more pronounced, get it all the way around by beating it at the edge of the anvil. My first anvil was actually a piece of railroad track, and it will make a cameo in here later because even that nice farrier's anvil that I use for blacksmithing and other stuff just doesn't let me do some of the stuff that I want to do. Now you see how the two pieces fit together. That's nice. And then the first rivet, this is the one that's always the tricky booger. Drive me nuts sometimes trying to get that first rivet. It actually took about 3 times as long as shown just to get that rivet to stay in place long enough for me to tap it down. But that's okay. Once you've got that first one in, it's a very simple matter just to chase up the sides, doing the rest of them. I like to do one and then skip a couple, do the next, and then fill in between. It just seems to hold everything steadier. Do not rivet the very top rivet where the top cap of the helm is going to go on. You do not fill that hole. You'll have to drill that out, and that's really embarrassing. Now I'm using the helm body as a pattern for drawing the top cap. First I trace around it, And then I'm going to draw another line about an inch further out. But before that, you can see I'm making these little ticky marks to show where each of the rivet holes is. That's because I'll be making little tabs. This is the super easy kind of cheater way to do it. I cut out the top cap, and then I'm cutting these tabs, and it looks a little bit like a very funky steel daisy when I'm done. And you can see there's my funky steel daisy after I've filed the edges smooth so I don't tear myself up. I don't want to have anything rough and nasty inside the helm. Now the reason for doing these is because it's the fastest way I know of to be able to shape a cap that can rivet on. If I were to raise the flange all the way around, which I have done in the past, it's a tiresome, tedious task. It looks much better. But here, I'm just gently persuading that top cap to go inside the helm. First time I did this, I put it on the outside. Worked just as well. Looks ugly. But a little bit of persuading with a hammer, and we've got the cap in. After that, it's a matter of drilling right through the rivet hole that's already in the main body of the helm and then through the tab. The reason for marking those little ticky marks where the holes are is so I could make sure the tabs would all line up with holes. Otherwise, you end up with riveting into air on the inside, and that doesn't really give you the protection you want. All right, at this point, I'm making a whimsical nasal, and this is the part where I'm deviating from the simplest helm I know. Really, it would have only taken a minute or two to take a scrap of 14 gauge and turn it into a simple nasal. But I decided I wanted something hand forged just because, well, then it makes my helmet more fun for me. If I had not done this little forging thing, yeah, and there's the inside of my forge. If I had not done this, and here I am just riveting it on, then the whole thing would have taken me 1 day. As it is, the nasal brought it up to 2 days, and that's not a terrible amount of time for somebody in his own garage. Just playing around with the inexpensive tooling. Clean off all the marker marks, and then flaring the bottom edge because that makes it a bit more comfortable, adds a bit of strength and rigidity just because it functions a little bit like an I-beam, having the steel in multiple dimensions. And I think it looks a lot better. It looks more finished to have that flare at the bottom edge, and finished is kind of nice, especially on a simple helm like this. And here we have the finished helm.